Hi everyone, the audience today. Thank you for participating in the Track C option. And this current panel is about how to fundraise from angel investors and venture capitalists. Right. So it's an hour session, and for the panelists here today, the audience are first-time entrepreneurs, business owners, entrepreneurs as well, looking for raising funds and also perhaps understanding more of the business landscape. Okay, so I'll just start off. You can do a round of introduction. Could you just share more about what you do on the day-to-day in your organization, Michelle? So maybe I'll start off with Michelle. Yeah. So Michelle, just for the audience here today, Michelle is actually leading ecosystems development and social impact catalyst, and she's also a senior associate at Quest Ventures, a leading fund in Asia. Right, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. I would also introduce myself. Thanks for the short introduction. I'm Michelle from Social Impact Catalyst. So my day job involves being in part of a venture capital firm. So at Social Impact Catalyst, I work with the executive team led by Tierney and Geraldine to support young entrepreneurs in social enterprises through design thinking programs and building an ecosystem for impact-driven entrepreneurship. So that's for Social Impact Catalyst. In Quest Ventures, my day job, I do venture capital for startup investment, ecosystem building for locally and globally to provide an environment suitable for startups, and also developing and executing accelerators to build capabilities. So that happens in Vietnam, in Malaysia, and also Kazakhstan. So that's something that I do, day to day. Thanks, Sharon. Back to you.
All right. We'll move on to Hui Jie. So Hui Jie is a serial entrepreneur. She is actually the founder and executive director of VisionGroup, and he has extensive business experience. He's been on board of 3 listed companies, listed his own company on the Australian Stock Exchange for over 300 Singapore dollars at the age of 30 years old. Before the age of 30 years old, so that's really one of the youngest executive director of a London listed company as well. So Hui Jie would like to share more of your day-to-day, what do you do? You may also add some more pointers if you'd like to share more about what you do at VisionGroup.
Yeah, so I would say that at VisionGroup, we focus a lot on future tech, primary technologies that will mature within the next 3 to 6 years. And today we're looking very much around the areas of data, specifically blockchain for data trust, AI for data clarity, and cybersecurity very much for peace of mind. So I guess from a day-to-day basis as a founder, very much it encompasses almost everything. But to summarize it down, it's really about charting the direction, identifying what's the right thing to do at the right time, at the right place, and really bring in the key strategic resources, like forming out the key talents and team, obviously raising the necessary funds to make sure that we are well fueled for our next growth and drive to our milestone.
Great, thanks, Hui Jie. Right, next we have Wei Ming. Right, Wei Ming is the partner and head of investments and of digital and sustainability at Nonny Hill Capital. Right, Wei Ming also managed a family office back VC, P investments under MAS, investing in deep tech, disrupting many industries, including sustainable infrastructures, also relations to telecommunications, aerospace, space tech, even. Wow! So Wei Ming is such huge, nice profile and experience you have there. Would like to share more about your day-to-day operations, also more about yourself.
Probably you'll take me another more minute to talk about myself.
I'll believe maybe more than a minute.
Yeah. So I actually, I'm also an entrepreneur actually, because I'm on my own business. So when I was a kid, I was a caddy and I was a waiter. And when I gone into my young adults, when I was studying, I was also doing delivery man, and I went into my study in the com science, and then thereafter I became an engineer. I was an IBM engineer when I first started, and then I became pretty much I joined Hewlett Packard in the 90s, and I became one of their team members helping Singapore government transform. That time it was really about information transformation, e-government. So I was actually part of the e-government team from a technology company perspective. So I used to bring PermSec, bring the head of IDA to Silicon Valley in the 90s. I've learned how Singapore government transformed. I've seen through the whole cycle. And then I went into joining the American HQ in Sun Microsystem, helping them develop commercialization in Java. This company called Sun Microsystem. So maybe if you went into computer science universities, you would had learned what is Java programming. So I was part of the team to develop the Java, trying to help industry develop and advocate as well as adopt Java. So, and then I gone into cloud computing. I was actually a pioneer in VMware, this company. So after a while in the corporate world, I've always had a entrepreneurial thing in mind, wanting to do something different. So I reinvented myself from a corporate executive into an entrepreneur. So I took up, I relearned what is finance, I relearned what is capital market, and I'm coming from a tech company, and I used to run all these businesses, helping companies transform from traditional way into perhaps the most efficient way of running their organization. So I think I thought of bringing this, and I started then this fund, and now here I am. I'm a venture capitalist, and we invested into pretty much globally all these disruptive technology. So we are one of the early investors of Elon Musk. So we invested in SpaceX, Tesla. We are also one of the early investors in Alibaba. So we invested in Jack Ma. So the company could be in Singapore, but we've been investing globally. And my job, day-to-day job, is to find who is the next Elon Musk and Jack Ma over the world, and helping them, mentoring them, not just giving them the capital, but also bringing what we need to help them build as a company forward. So based on my experience from the corporate world, we work together, and that's what my job keeping me going every day.
Wow, really inspirational. Many of the great entrepreneurs all have a really good support and mentor like yourself and your team, right? So well, we've heard so much about the panelists themselves, what they do day to day, and I think for the audience here today, as entrepreneurs trying to raise funds, I think one of the key concerns would be what exactly are their investment mandates, right? So we have Hui Jie, who also do the investing, Michelle and Wei Ming, both are leading funds, and perhaps you could share more about what are your investment mandates. Anyone will take the floor first?
Maybe for me to start off with.
Sure.
So, to me, at the end of the day is how do we look at this entrepreneur? How serious is this entrepreneur? And like what Minister has said, I think we are all living in the intellectual world. I think it's not about IQ, it's about EQ. And this is where we see that to help invest into a bold, courageous, as well as somebody that believes that they can make a difference. This is not about technology. Yes, technology leads the innovation, leads the transformation, but at the end of the day, it's still the human thing. And how we think to invest is to build a group of human beings coming together, looking at how to transform the world using technology from an innovation point of view, to disrupt and make it better so that this whole disruption can help to create more benefit to the whole world. And this is the mandate that I carry on the daily basis to invest on.
Great. Really like ecosystem support and really sector agnostics or any kind of industries, as long as we have great founders running them. Yeah. Thank you, Wei Ming. Right. So perhaps Hui Jie or Michelle, who would like to share more about investment mandates next?
Yeah. So from a VisionGroup perspective, our mandates are slightly different. We come very much more from a strategic corporate investment perspective. So our mandate is very much narrowed towards what's strategic towards our current business, either from a go-to-market distribution model or very much from a strong technology standpoint that is very much suited towards our technology stack or blueprint. We have participated in about 4 different investments over the last 12 months. We are currently working on 2 more, which we hope to close up over the next 6 months. It's pretty much 50-50. 50% very much focused on a go-to-market to open up specific markets that assist our current so-called growth plan. And the other is very much more on strong technology suites.
Great. I think because that's really complementary business, and how can you best add value to the companies you're supporting that complements your work at VisionGroup and your leveraging on your strength in technology. Michelle, we'd like to share more about the investment mandates at Quest Ventures.
Sure, I will share more about like Quest Ventures investment mandate. I think similar to Wiming and Huijie, right? We are very focused on the founders and also like the go-to-market. So we invest in very early stage startups in the seed and Series A space. So digital economy is our investment mandate. So that spreads across a lot of different sectors, including fintech, edtech, I think supply chain, logistics, e-commerce as well. So for the current fund that we do have, Fund 2 is Asia focused and Fund 3 is maritime focused. We have about 90 plus portfolio companies right now, and they operate in over 150 cities. And we are also like a partner of Startup SG Founder Grant from Enterprise Singapore to support first-time founders with pre-seed funding of 50,000, not very big, but it's to allow them to set up their company and grow to a certain stage to raise some funding with the help of Quest Ventures, of course.
Great, thanks, Michelle. And of course, many of the early stage investments in Carousel, Shopback, etc. These are notable brands from Singapore to the world. Right, and I think now it's really, understanding investment mandate is something an entrepreneur needs to know. Also, as an entrepreneur, right, I'll be curious, what would these investors look out for when they want to invest or when I pitch the business to them? So panelists, what do you look out for when founders pitch their business to you? Perhaps, Huijie, do you want to start off first?
Yeah, I guess from founders, it's very much their passion in the things that they do and how much they believe in it. Yet at the same time, having that balance of what is executable and what's realistic in being able to execute. So many a time, certain founders are super so-called energetic and of lights and think their product are best in the world. But the other aspect of being able to go to the market to validate their product, to make sure that people are looking at very much at so-called the same value as what they have very much in their head. So I think founders that very much have a strong passion for what they do, yet at the same time is able to dream and at the same time bring themselves be grounded to focus on execution, focus on market validation, focus on what their customers want from value perspective is important. And most importantly for me, I always look out for what I term as the X factor, what really makes a person or entrepreneur different from very much the rest. And I can't really put that in words. It's more of like a feeling rather, so that's something that I can actually describe.
Great. Does age matter to you?
No, actually age, not, you realize that there are certain founders that I've worked with actually that are a little bit more senior, but surprisingly, you should see some of the amount of experience and network and that aspect is actually very important in that specific area as well. So having that combination of so-called experience, network, go-to-market, and having a unique idea of solving a specific gap in the market that probably is not being solved yet, I think that's very much a good combination.
Great, nice. All right, Wiming, how about you? What do you look for in the founders?
Yeah. I think what Huijie talked about is essentially very critical. On top of it, it's very important for whether you are young or whether you are a more senior entrepreneur, all right? It's all about looking at how you're able to look at problem. I think back to 101 is to create the value to your customer, to your employee, as well as to your shareholder. That what the problem. So we always spot on the founding team needs to really keep looking at problems, and all this evolution of technologies are changing how solutions can be formulated. And this is a continuous effort. So it doesn't mean that today you are the most cutting edge guy who came up with this solution called a product, means that this is going to sit with you for, forever. So that adaptability has to be very, very disciplined. Always looking at how, when you're talking to your customer, is how to solve this problem in a bigger scale. So today you're a startup company, you solve their problem in this area. Tomorrow, when you are on a, more in a way advancing yourself into perhaps outside of Singapore, this could be the big problem, right? So that problem itself, the identification of the problem and coming out with already your formula of success, plus creating new strategy, bringing people coming together and creating that solution in the bigger scale. The IP may not be yours, but you're able to lead the whole project and bring that whole solution set to the customer and create the value and help them to bring them to the level of seeing you as a trusted advisor. I think that is very critical to run a successful company. And this is the kind of recipe that we are looking at in a founding team, whether they are able to do just a Singapore market or Southeast Asian market, or if not the global market. That's how we measure them.
Great. And I think through this whole process, we're identifying market leaders can invest in, like Tesla for electric vehicles, SpaceX even. So really interesting points, yeah. All right, Michelle, how about you?
If we're talking about the founders who pitch their business, personally, what I look out for are founders who know their numbers, so of their business and the market opportunity. So have they assessed the industries that they are in, and if the industries are positioned for tremendous growth, and whether it's benefiting from the tailwind of the pandemic. I think this is extremely important for us also. And we also want to know what's their fundraising goals and their growth strategies. I think one of the things another thing that's very important would be that there must be strong founders, and the founding team must have the tenacity and resilience to make the dream happen. Very important at the early stage, and whether the company will 3x by the next round that they are raising, maybe in the next 12 to 18 months.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important, having that plan in mind. Although most of the plans may not be the same, given the pandemic like this is something unpredictable. So, well, at least they've thought about it. I think that's important.
And I think, if I may say another point, which is very critical, I think it's always what have they learned, what lesson have they learned? Because we always ask question, how are you so successful? But we also must ask them, how much failure have you gone through? What are the lessons that you have learned? And ask them to illustrate the lessons that they learned. And we give them our, basically we share with them how people has overcome some of the lessons that they learned. So suddenly we become, a soul searching for them in terms of what they think that their weakest point, the weakest link. We not just giving them the capital, but we also give them that direction, if not also giving them the right connection for them to help bridge the gap.
Yeah.
And I think, that part of that engagement process, working with the entrepreneur, is very critical.
Yeah, I think on all aspects, right? Even not just on the business itself, but also on their mental wellness, about the team, and essentially is as though as a doctor administrating a patient to some extent, I would say, yeah. Right. So for the audience here today, if you have some questions you have for the panelists, please do type in the questions in the chat below. I'll be more than happy to share the questions with the panelists towards the end of this session. Yeah. So I've heard many of them, the panelists, about what they look for founders. So now going more into what do each of these panelists do have to offer as well, right? So Michelle, understand you're doing ecosystem development at Social Impact Catalyst, right? So how does an entrepreneur benefit from such an ecosystem?
Thanks, Jaren. So I think ecosystem is very important. An ecosystem shortens the time for entrepreneurs to solve business problems and also learn mistakes from industry peers. So similar to what Miming has mentioned, it actually helps shorten the time for you to learn about a lot of things and like prevent making the same mistakes that maybe all entrepreneurs make. So I think ecosystem is important in that aspect. And another aspect is that you can share resources, networks, and tools that are very common in this industry or maybe like in the startup sector. And also, I think with this support network, it will make the founder's journey not so lonely. And I believe that that's very important for founders.
Great. Yeah, important. Yeah, true. The ecosystem support, especially what SIC has to offer to this ecosystem here for entrepreneurs. Yeah. So adding on also to your experience at Quest Ventures, right? Given that it's a leading early stage venture fund in Asia, could you share more about this difference? Because I think some entrepreneurs will question, right? What's the difference between a VC and an angel? What does it mean to them? And also apart from capital, what else have or your portfolio companies benefited from it?
Okay, sure. I think the difference between angel investors and VCs, it's a primary fact that angels are wealthy individuals, so like high net worth individuals who invest their own money into companies. They might assemble themselves into like angel networks and then do syndicated investments. For VCs, we are employees of the venture capital firm, so we invest other people's money into our portfolio companies. So angels maybe take bigger risk and they take larger stakes in your startup, so they might end up having a lot of control over your company. For VC, it is still risk capital, but there's a need for you to have a clear return for our investments. So I think with that, right, we want you to we want you to succeed, and I think with that we'll provide you with all the knowledge and connections that we have to ensure that you achieve the kind of growth that we set out to have. Yeah, and apart from capital, I would say that Quest Ventures do provide our portfolio companies with our Quest family benefits. So this helped them save costs like about USD 770,000. And then you would also have access to our mentors and founders networks to up to 200 experts, and it's still growing. And you would also be able to build your startup alongside the Quest team, which do have various capacity building programs such as the Vietnam Global Innovation, Scale Up Malaysia, and Kazakhstan Digital Accelerator.
Wow, awesome. And I think we have also, Wei Ming and Hui Jie both also do angel investments apart from their fund themselves. I believe so, yeah? Yes, good. Cool. And Wei Ming, right? So you've heard from, about your experience, right? The extensive experience in your corporate MNCs you have been involved in. So actually, what actually made you interested to have a shift towards investments and fund management? Just curious on that.
Well, when you are in the corporate world, after a while, you don't want to get retrenched. You want to reinvent yourself. But that's kidding. But what I think more important is that for me, I'm a continuous learning person. So I look at where I am today, and I look at how to prepare my next, the next juncture. And this is important that to bring. How am I able to bring the corporate know-how, the transformation in the business, as well as the fast-pacing learning technology. So when I talk through all this, what I've been doing for almost 15 years, I suddenly think that can I just impart that knowledge to the young people? And I thought one day, perhaps if I were to come out to become a consultant myself, I cannot stick hold with them. The only way for me to stick hold and not just mentoring them, but working with them as partner is to invest. And that's why I've learned how to create that my reinvention path, to stick hold with them, to basically give them what I've known, not just what I've learned, but the connection, the connectivity in the market. to them, and then put the money with them, and also more important, help them to fundraise to me. So now suddenly I'm also one of the founding member that I would raise more money and put that money into them. You see, so that helps them to focus, laser focus on their market know-how, how to bring customers, how to retain the customers, and organize how they can be more competitive. And the other part of the business, which is bringing money into and all these things, perhaps I can do the work for them. You see, so I think that's the kind of leverage that people will look at. That what I've learned, and this is also what I will leverage them for my investors. Because I'm a fund manager, so I will have a lot of investors coming in. Like what Michelle said, we are dealing with not just our own money, but the others, right? So the accountability has to be there. And that's why we will definitely bring the right quality of the deal, that we invest in them, plus getting them to invest in the fund that we run, right?
Right. So it's really, the smart money coming in with experience in corporates. And I also believe many of the companies at early stage, they would struggle with sales, right? And then that connection could probably help them. I believe so.
Absolutely. And one other thing's very important is that venture capitalists needs to learn what is regulatory framework, right? Because when a Singaporean company goes into Indonesia, goes into Malaysia, it's a different battleground, and not just the connection, but you need to understand the regulatory framework so that they don't get themselves into trouble.
Yes, of course. I think that's really crucial given that we're venturing the unknowns, but has huge potential in Southeast Asia. And I think also recently the Indonesian government just changed their tax structure and how the business operation would be like that for certain type of entities. Yeah.
Correct. Another point, if I may, just because I think we've got entrepreneur, also perhaps we also have some VCs here. All right. I think both VCs and entrepreneur must look themselves in the same team. Be it whether the VC put in 10%, 30%, it could be significantly minority, it doesn't matter. Okay, what it matters here is to look at who brings that value to the table. And money itself is just one of the ingredient, but the more important is to organize yourself into the stakeholding strategy, and then VCs themselves needs to also know how to raise more money, right? And then to bring that resources back to the company that they believe in, that they are backing, all right? So it's not a one-time investing. It's always continuously looking at what's are the leverage. For instance, for us, we have invested in venture capitalist fund. So because we've invested in them, okay, and we somehow then we share some portfolios insights, and then if they have done something, because we invested in the US, we invested in Europe. So some of those things that, and I sit in some of the VC's private equity board as the advisor. So what we do here is that we bring some of the know-how and bring some of the resources back to Asia, and then that's how then they will be scaling into Series B, Series C, Series D, right? Plus, if today you are a very early stage company, that is also very critical because there's a lot of spin-off coming from A-Star and whatever thing, right? So people are looking at the product level, but we look at how to bring that market connectivity to them. Yeah. So I think VC needs to equip in all these skill set so that you will have a very happy marriage at the end of the day. Yeah. And that's very critical for young VCs to be in this industry. It's a very, very difficult industry, very, very tough, but that's how you make yourself it makes yourself a difference. And entrepreneur themselves, also young people needs to not only understand what is technology, they need to understand what is money matters. When you take money from people, it is your responsibility not to earn the money. Your responsibility is to build that value of the money that people has given you, and you take this and show people that you are not just accountable, but you're able to learn the experience and then become better. Yeah. So entrepreneur needs to learn that.
Yeah, that's really wise word, Ming. I think growing that value itself and having VCs to have complementary support across the portfolio companies. And it's interesting to know that you've also invested in funds of funds and really scaling the impact to a global level. And given, I believe, back then your friends also in MNCs, corporate executive, do you also see more of your friends or corporate executives starting their own ventures? And if so, are there any benefits or advantages to that?
Absolutely. Like what Hui Jie has seen, a more senior entrepreneur, we are also seeing more senior mentor that has transformed themselves as a consultant. You see, before this whole innovation sector is taking off in Singapore, we are seeing a lot of very valuable qianpei, okay, very, very valuable, talented pool that they were actually managing director, CEO of the Asia Pacific region. So now the trend here that I've seen, and I've been always encouraging all these ex-colleague of mine, is to also set up their own fund and learn how to invest and stakehold. I think at the end of the day, it's not about investment, it's the stakeholding into what you believe in that business that somebody is driving, not you now. Yeah. So that partnership needs to be scalable. And instead of they in the past giving a lot of consulting, a lot of training to the entrepreneur, now we have seen the trend is for them to stakehold more with them and giving them the ammunition. And I think this is all good. And I hope that if a minister is still online, I would also perhaps suggest to the minister is to really look at how to elevate this pool of qianpei back to our society instead of not letting them retire so early. We need to repurpose them with their talent, with their market connectivity, and some of the money they've got back into where our whole entire ecosystem, and that will make Singapore ecosystem a big difference, because Singapore ecosystem, or rather Singapore corporate hub, has a lot of talent pool in regional management, regional market management, if not global management as well. So we need to bring these people back to where, and we help them to stakehold back into the young entrepreneur and help them then scale up.
Yeah, really, truly, fully agree with whatever you've said, Ming. I think that the ecosystem for the more experienced individuals in the corporate space to come back to empower these young entrepreneurs, right? And also potentially start our own funds to give back and also grow their investments, wealth preservation and legacy planning, etc. I think these are really useful tips and really encouraging for corporate executives.
Correct.
Thanks, Ming. All right. And last, we'll have like Hui Jie. Hui Jie, given that you have started off as an entrepreneur, right, what's the challenges you face when fundraising? That would be one question that I would also want to ask.
Well, I guess when I first started, I really didn't know who to raise money from, right? So I just went around and raised from anybody I can find and anybody I can talk to. But then again, I would say that's one.
You managed to speak to Wei Ming? I think he was.
Well, no, Wei Ming for a while already. So, so I guess the thing about entrepreneurs, very importantly for fundraising, is that they really need to know the investor's mandate. They need to know the investor's intention. And at the same time, they need to know the investor's value add. And this three is actually the most important things, I think, from fundraising perspective. Because if you don't know the investor's mandate and you speak to a lot of them, technically you're wasting their time, you're also wasting your time. And if you do know their mandate, it's actually very much easier to communicate directly on the value proposition you have, your so-called startup, as well as communicating to what they're actually looking for. The second part, other than investor mandate, it's really about looking very much at the intentions of the investors. Are they there to flip? Are they there to drive sustainable business? Are they looking for exit through a listing? And many a time that's very important to be aligned with the so-called founders. Otherwise, as the startup do grow, and hopefully it does grow, then there might be certain more tough discussions that both the founders and the investors will need to start to have. And that might take up a lot of mental toll, especially when you're already spending a lot of time. already on driving the business and making sure that's cash flow positive and running all the day-to-day items. And lastly, the more important thing is also the value add the investor bring forth. Because many a time you're not just looking at capital that the investor can bring. If they have a specific value add in the domain or network or the go-to-market, opening up certain forms of markets or specific domain, that's actually something that is super valuable because it's not something sometimes that you want to find or spending money can easily be obtained. So I guess if I had known this from when I first started from a fundraising so-called state, these three key things of talking to investors on knowing first their mandate, their intentions, and value add will save me so much time and so much more mistakes that I previously have actually made before.
Right. Wow. I would say it would even be challenging to list out all the challenges in such a short 1 hour panel. Yeah. There's a lot more to it. And I hope, we can invite you for the next panel subsequently, to share more, right? And another question would be, given your extensive entrepreneur experience, right, and business successes, is it necessary to raise funds from VCs, and at what stage, when will you recommend the entrepreneurs to raise funds from VCs?
I think I'll take this very much from two different perspectives. It's very much the objective for the startup. Depending on the business model, quite a number of businesses would probably need to raise very much at the early stage to fund some of the developments. Whereas for certain business models, they can be almost cash flow positive, although rarely, but they can be almost cash flow positive pretty much quickly. So it's very much important to weigh out what the founder value of that specific fundraise and what is the use of proceeds and eventually where that use of proceeds can bring him towards. So if his valuation's at 10 million, he raised $1 million, and so-called $1 million can bring him to the next stage where it'd be worth $30 million based on his use of proceeds. Oh, by all means, because that actually makes sense. So it really depends on what the founder has as a key goal. Does he want to build the business over a period of time? Does he actually wants to so-called expedite so-called the growth? However, many a time, I think the bulk of the fundraise many a time comes from the part on scaling a business. So there's always different stages where you want to first initially build the product pre-revenue, then you want to do market validation, and eventually you want to scale. So founders should know roughly, in the market, there already are certain benchmarks in this specific area on what to do. And typically, of course, you want to raise a little bit more than what you actually planned. If your runways, you're going to raise for about 12 months, make sure you raise for 15 to at least 18 months because fundraising will not actually be as quick as you think it might be. So I think this is from one aspect. I think from the other aspect, I would say to a certain extent, you'll always be raising, but it's about how much you throttle it, right? So although you might not be actively raising for a specific round, you will always want to meet up with potential investors. Primarily because I think that raising funds is very much like building a relationship, right? It's not when you really need it or you want the funds and then you go to a VC and they give it to you immediately. They want to know you, you want to know them, and eventually over time you build a relationship. And even though you're not actively raising at that point of time, you want to meet up with them, give updates. And it's actually helpful because firstly, they get to know you better, they understand your progress, but at the same time, you actually get to get very valuable industry tips on what's happening in the market, considering they're seeing so many other different startups. So I would say to a certain extent, you'll always be raising and building the relationships with the venture or the potential investors, primarily because you just want to make sure that you have that close relationship at the point of time you want to trigger. The funny thing is sometimes when you compete around, then some of the investors will come and say, hey, do you have any more left, or hey, can you slot me into that final bid, so on and so forth. So it's always good to catch up with them because you never know. Sometimes they might just surprise you with so-called a last-minute decision to participate in that round.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Faith. Yeah. I think I have a question to go a little more technical. Given that fundraising and all that may be necessary for certain kind of business that are capital intensive, right? Do you recommend, a bank loan or a convertible note from investors?
That really depends. This is a question that it's really much more of an art as well as a science, primarily because it really depends on the structure of who you're raising it from. Is it like a private equity? Is it venture capital of the likes? They will typically have their own mandate on whether they prefer like a convertible or they rather do a debt structure of the likes. Of course, from a founder perspective, if you were to take certain loans, and in fact, if you believe strongly in your startup that eventually that the equity will more for the loans and you can actually return the loans and you don't have to convert it, well, it's the best of both worlds to a certain extent, right? For very much the startup founder. So it's really a conversation that I would say depending on the objective of the founder, but many a time it's also depending on objective and mandate of the investor as well. So although you might want it, but well, depends on the other side. It takes two hands to clap. So it really depends. And some structures for that might be a little bit better than so-called equity. So you need to know what you're actually raising for. Is it for project financing, or is it specifically really to fund and fuel the growth of the startup? So it's really many variables, I would say, to answer that question.
Great. Thanks, Hui. And we do have a question from the audience, right? So Jonathan for us, Wei-Ming, what are the learnings or failures you have for the company that went through? And I believe would be your venture fund. Are there any learnings or challenges, failures that you went through?
No, absolutely. I think the failure has many forms, and depending how much, which angle are you emphasizing? Whether it's a financial failure or whether it's a organization failure or even an expectation failure, right? And as a venture capitalist, when you look at there is a failure happening in your portfolio company, the first thing is not to look at the financial, because the financial will not be the underlying area, underlying fault line that you look at. You really look at what is the fault line behind. And many of the times what I've learned is always to do with people, to do with the founder, not about the market. Okay? So, number one, the three things that in the failure that where you need to look at where the fault line is. Number one, the fault line is that, are there any competitor that has been targeting them, taking away some of their people? Okay, core people normally are the guys that, whether they are in the field, which is the sales side, or the back end architect. Okay, not the founders. People will never take away the founders, right? So that's two areas. The second area is very important to me. Has the founder already gone into his comfort zone, so complacent that he loses his soul of fighting? Okay, suddenly he got his Series A, $2 million. He thought, hey, I'm just going to hire people. When you are in the hiring spree, bringing a very good people, suddenly the founders, his performance gone down. It's not the team gone down, right? So I think all these things, the fault line where you need to is to sit down with them again, okay, and really talk straight with them to say that, this is the issue. We have to learn from the mistakes, but we need to create a contingency plan. If the contingency plan is the people, the core team has already been poached by their competitor, then I think we really need to do some recovery. All right, the founders typically has to step in back and take up the job, take up this role until they found people. Okay, so these are the I think in terms of failure, it's not about whether there's no failure. There's always failure, but how do you detect the failure? How do you create a recovery plan? And then how do you then ensure that the execution of the founding team is there as agreed in the recovery plan and move forward in life?
Great points. I can see why Wei-Ming and Hui Jie are, knowing each other for a long time, and I believe you've supported one another because of the values alike. And I think these are really good, information you've shared to the founders here today, the entrepreneurs, or those who are thinking to start up. So I believe it's been really encouraging, right? And knowing that our entrepreneurs here and our senior corporate executives are willing to come back to help the ecosystem, develop Singapore's business ecosystem itself, and for us to go global from day one. right? And all right, so I don't think we have any other questions from the audience, and I'll probably just go on straight to wrap this up. Really for all panelists here today, right? What would that one advice you want to give to founders who are fundraising?
So maybe I should start with.
Sure, go ahead.
Don't fundraise.
What would you give to the founders?
Don't go to anyone and ask for money. Go to everyone and make people believe in you. That's more important. Okay, don't go and ask for money. Says that a lot of people has been always concentrating the discussion point on, hey, I need 2 million, and this is the 2 million that what, I think at the end of the day, and by the way, my valuation is that oh man, I think I think that's not what you need to do. You have to give them a true report and account of what has been accomplished. Number one, right? The accomplishment of the track record is important. Share with them that this is the recipe that I've created successfully. Now what I need next, and basically invite them to work with you to really look at how to tackle the issues and the shortcoming, and therefore how this money can be there to bridge the gap. Okay, and second thing is that don't go to people when then you need money. As an entrepreneur, you need to be very resourceful. Okay, come to know us before even you need the money. All right, come to know us and come to educate us. What have you been doing? How much difference can you make it? How much you can make a difference, and then just build the relationship. Okay, and become friends. And I always go to Hui Jie. Hui Jie said, I don't need money, but we are still good friends. And we share with each other how, we can be successful, right? So when one day he said, I need money, I'm not going to see Hui Jie that, that just come to me for money, because I know what he's doing, right? So I think that's the kind of relationship that every entrepreneur, whether you are at the very early start or at the later stage, you still need to have that kind of resource.
Great. Really, there's also something building relationships as humans ourselves, right? It's something that even AI can't replace, because the human connection. And of course, it will be a lot better if we could have a physical session. But by all means, because of COVID, we could make do with a virtual session. But hopefully, post COVID-19 or when things get better, we could have physical networking, right? For great people like yourself, Wei Ming, Hui Jie, Michelle, to come on board to share with our fellow founders. And we do have a question from Abdul. Right? He asked, right, should we incorporate first, or is it important to find a partner investor first? Maybe Hui Jie or would like to take the floor, given your entrepreneurial sharings and experience. Yeah.
Sorry, should he incorporate as an incorporated company first? Or?
Yeah, I believe that was he meant. Yeah.
Or find an investor or
partner first.
Well, I guess that's just an administrative tool. But if you find an investor and you don't even have a company, I guess they might think you're not serious. I guess you try to find a partner, you don't have a company, probably, they might think you're not serious as well. I would, it's just a basic, in Singapore, you can do it in 3 hours or less than 24 hours. I always believe no harm incorporating it, and we can see how we can so-called settle the rest of it after that.
Yeah. Thanks, Hui Jie. And I think probably Wei Ming was one of the few who were in the front line to help improve the governance and the efficiency of the government, allowing businesses set up quickly. Yeah. Thanks, Wei Ming. Thank you for the hard work back then, so that we can enjoy the benefits now. And Michelle, given that you are from the venture capital fund, would you then have some advice for Abdul?
I think with regards to incorporating first or raising first, it really depends who we are raising from. Yeah, and I would say that if you're in Singapore and you're a Singaporean, maybe you want to consider getting your pre-seed money from the Startup SG Founder Grant. Yeah, so like within the first 6 months of your incorporation, you are actually eligible for this grant. So like before you incorporate or within 6 months in terms of your incorporation. And then with an registered entity, I would think that fundraising from your seed and also Series A investors, that would be more possible. Yeah, because we definitely want to see like uh, I would say like a proof of value and also like that you're scaling and there's some traction. Yeah, and it's very hard to prove that if you don't have a
Right. So
company
Michelle,
registered.
given that you are
Yeah.
taking the question, what would then your advice be for the founders who are fundraising through your fund?
Right. I think like in terms of that, I really agree with both Wei Ming and Hui Jie. So like you have to do your research and know your investors even before you're raising, especially if you're raising from VCs. You need to you can pitch to them even before and get feedback from investors' point of view, like what they might be looking for. And also, just as Hui Jie mentioned, right, it's good to know like their investment mandate, check sizes, and also like value add. So this will not make the investor, this will then make the investor pitch like more productive, and it will increase your success of going forward in terms of like the process that every VC do have. And also echoing Wei Ming in the earlier part of the panel, a relationship with your VC is really long term. So it's likened to be getting married. You must make sure that you will be able to work with them to grow your company towards a common goal, and will be able to work with them even as time gets hard and the goal changes and your company has to pivot. I think like during the COVID time, it was a very good stress test about like whether you're suitable for each other, the VC and the founders. So I think in terms of that, you need to maybe check even before you go into like this VC and startup relationship.
Right. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Hui Jie and thanks, Wei Ming, so much for your time today. Are there any last words from the panelists? Anything you want to say to the audience?
Maybe I should just say something that is in my heart every day. We are in the pandemic, and everybody felt very down in the beginning, but now there's light in the tunnel. But uncertainty is still there. Whether you are today as already a very seasoned entrepreneur, or you wanting to test what is entrepreneurship, you need to do one thing. You need to really look at the pandemic and create something where you turn the pandemic into an opportunity. So whether you're a fintech company or you're IoT company, it doesn't matter, right? Because the whole pandemic changes the whole world, right? And how you live, how you work, and therefore, I think there's really a new way of doing things. And please be optimistic and go around trying to understand from people, talk to more people, what is the impact. I think at the end of the day, what we need to do after this pandemic world, there's only one key word that we want to take away: impact. How can we create an impact? Okay, so we need to reflect ourselves and look at how to reposition ourselves. Where, if we were able to reposition ourselves, we know how to create new market for ourselves, and this is the opportunity. And that opportunity that we think in our mind set through, we need to ask ourselves, can this be an impact? Impact to Singapore, impact to the region, impact to the world. Okay, so that's important that everybody needs to keep thinking every day.
Great. Thanks,
Yeah.
Wei Ming. That's really very encouraging. I think what you've mentioned is really true. Entrepreneurs at this time, the stress test from COVID and the relationship building is really the adversity quotient that entrepreneurs have within them. And then capitalize on that opportunity and grow a global business. Thank you, Wei Ming. Thank you, Hui Jie. Thank you, Michelle, for your time. Let us just take a group photo together. I'll give a count to 3 and then we could take a photo. Yeah. So please put on your brightest smile. All right, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, panelists, for your time, and the audience. Audience, do stay on. I will now share screen, and then we'll find out who's the lucky winner. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you. See you.